Hello everyone, my name is Nikita and I am from the Bodhi Academy. Today we are going to start with a new chapter from 10th Standard Science textbook, that is chapter number 9, Heredity and Evolution. Okay, so this chapter, when we talk about this chapter actually contains two parts. The first part talks about the heredity and the second part talks about the evolution. Now, to understand this, we first need to know what is heredity. Okay, what is heredity? Heredity is the actually it is the inheritance of traits and characters. Now, what do you mean by a trait? A trait is a specific character, for example, eye color, skin color, or the hair color, the texture of the hair. These all are traits which are inherited from first generation to second generation. So when there is reproduction between two organisms, there is inheritance of traits, and that the sum total of all this inheritance is called as heredity. Okay, now inheritance of genes and characters is called as heredity. Now when we talk about these characters, a specific character is actually controlled by a particular gene, which is the DNA. This DNA is present inside the nucleus of a cell, and these genes control these characters. So we know that when there is reproduction, the genes are transferred. Okay, the genes are transferred from first generation to second generation, and therefore there is also transfer or the inheritance of that particular traits. Okay, now when we were learning about reproduction in the chapter reproduction, we saw there are two types of reproduction. There is sexual and there is asexual reproduction. In the asexual reproduction, there is only involvement of one organism, but in sexual reproduction, two organisms are involved. Now, because two organisms will be involved, the uh, traits will have features from both the organisms. For example, if the mother has blue color eyes and if the father has black color eyes, so when there is sexual reproduction, the new offspring can have either blue or either black. There is never mixture of both. Okay, so there are two versions of one copy. So there is inheritance of either one of the trait, either from the mother or either from the father. So that is how the traits get inherited, and there is more variation in the sexual reproduction as compared to the asexual reproduction, and this variation actually helps. Okay, for example, in the new variation which was formed in the offspring, there it will lead to resistance of some of the resistance of a particular disease, which is actually advantageous to the offspring. Okay, so sexual reproduction leads to variation and inheritance of different traits. Okay, so when so how we knew about this inheritance of traits? So there was this scientist who was John Gregor Mendel. Gregor John Mendel, he was educated in a monastery and went to study science and mathematics in the University of Vienna. And then he was the one who came with rules of inheritance, and he was the one who worked out on many experiments which told us which how the traits got inherited and what controlled the traits. Okay, so John Gregor Mendel, he used a experimental organism. Okay, he used the plant which is called as pea plant. Why he chose pea plant as the model organism? Because there were different characters in this pea plant, different traits, and there were different versions of this trait. For example, the garden peas, it had round and wrinkled seeds. Also the height of the plants, it had tall and short plants also. Then the color of the flowers, that was white and violet flowers. Okay, so this all characters, he saw that there are versions of the characters. Okay, different versions of the characters, and there are many characters. There were around 7 characters. Okay, so he worked out with something called as the Mendel cross. In the Mendel cross, he took two types of plants. Okay, one plant is the tall plant and one plant is the short plant, and he crossed all this. So this was the parent generation, and after crossing, he saw the results what were of the cross. Okay, so this is called as the monohybrid cross. So you can see over here he has considered one type of trait, that is tallness. Okay, so Mendel's monohybrid cross. Okay, so monohybrid cross is when you consider one character. And here over here the character was the height of the plant. Okay, so when he saw there were two versions of the height, one was tall and one was short. So he represented the height with the letter T to be the tall plant and small letter to be the short plant. Okay, so for a tall plant he took two letters of capital letters T, and for a short plant he took two small letters. Okay, now we know that the for the reproduction we need the gametes. Okay, and when these gametes came together, there is the process of reproduction. So after this, after crossing, one gamete from this plant and one gamete from this plant gave the new combination. Okay, the F1 generation. This was called as the parent generation, the P generation, and this was called as the F1 generation. Okay, it was the plant. It was this with a one capital letter and one small letter. Now the plant was tall. Okay, all the plants from this generation were tall. Now what does this mean? Okay, what does this mean? This means that this tall T, okay, this capital T was more expressed. Okay, it over expressed, and this small letter T was under expressed. Okay, so this means that this capital T was dominant over here. It was the dominant trait over here. Tallness was the dominant trait in this generation. But now Mendel wanted to find out if this was actually expressed or it was not expressed. Okay, so for that reason he self-pollinated the plants of the first generation. Okay, he self-pollinated the plants of first generation. So these were the gametes. Okay, and now after combination to fertilization, this with this will give you both capitals. This will give you one capital, one small. Okay, so this were the results of the crossing of the first generation progeny. He found that this plant was tall, both T's, one capital T, one small t, this was tall, one capital T, one small, this was also tall, but this one had both short, okay, both small letters, so this was the short plant. So the ratio over here was 3 tall, okay, and 1 short. So the ratio was 3:1. Okay, the ratio of tall to short was 3 is to 1. Now, what does this tell us? What does this tell us? This tells us that this Mendel concluded from this that the short plant character, okay, the gene for the short plant character which was not expressed, which was under expressed over here, was expressed in this F2 generation. Okay, this was called as F2 generation. It was expressed, so this means that it was present in the F1 generation. It is not that it was completely absent, it was present. Only thing, because T was dominant, this dominant character, this T masked the recessive character. It completely shadowed the recessive character, so it was not expressed, okay, but it was present, and it was expressed in the F2 generation, okay. So the second cross showed Mendel that from that he could conclude that the recessive character was expressed, but it was only masked by the dominant character. That's why it was not shown over here. Okay. And finally it got expressed in the F2 generation. Okay, so these two crosses are very important. They are monohybrid crossed. The ratio over here is 3 is to 1. Okay. So now second type of cross Mendel did was with which was a dihybrid cross, wherein Mendel took two characters. Okay, one was the shape of the seed, and the second one was the color of the seed. And over here we can see this was RR was for round, and YY was for green, small y. Okay, then small r was for wrinkled, and capital Y was for yellow. So round was the dominant trait for the shape of the seeds, and yellow was the dominant trait for the color of the seeds. Okay, and green was the recessive trait for the color of the seed, and wrinkled was the recessive trait for the shape of the seed. He did F1 generation, which gave round yellow, or both the dominant, okay, both the dominant traits. And finally when he did the big cross, okay, with the self pollination cross, he saw that the ratio was 9 is to 3 is to 3 is to 1. 9 were round and yellow, 3 were round and green, okay, and 3 were wrinkled and yellow, and 1 was wrinkled and green. Only 1 was with both the recessive characters, okay, and the 9 were both with dominant characters, and these 2 were intermediate. Okay, so this showed that the hybrid cross also worked the same way as in the monohybrid cross. It also followed the same principle. So from here we can say that each traits have two copies. One is the two copies of the genes controlled. One is the dominant gene, which will give the dominant character, but in the first generation. That does not mean that the recessive one will never be expressed. It can be expressed in the second generation. Okay, when there are self-pollination, it can be expressed. So dominant trait is the one which is expressed and it suppresses the recessive character, and recessive is the one which gets suppressed by the dominant one and gets expressed in the second generation. Okay, so over here it is important to know what are dominant characters, what are recessive characters, and how they are expressed. And it is very important to learn this crosses, the monohybrid cross. Okay, so we have learned how the traits get expressed. Now second important thing which we need to know in this part of the chapter is sex determination in humans. Okay, now what do you mean by sex determination? Means the gender. Okay, after fertilization of the zygote, okay, after reproduction, what the gender of the offspring will be. Will it be male or will it be female? For that we have two variations. Either it can be male and either it can be female in humans. Okay, some of the organisms, the sex determination depends upon the temperature. Okay, and but in humans the sex determination is always genetically determined. The sex is genetically determined. Okay, means it depends upon the chromosomes. Okay, for this we need to know that we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay, all humans have 23 pairs, means 46 chromosomes. Among this, the 22 pairs are autosomes, means they are present in the somatic cells, they control the somatic cells, and one is the sex chromosome. One pair is the sex chromosome pair. Okay, among this, the sex chromosome in the male, it is X and Y, and in the female the sex chromosome pair is X and X. Okay, so in the male it is X and Y, and in the female it is X and X. Now, during reproduction, what happens is that we know that all the cells are diploid in our body. All the cells are diploid, means there are 2n, okay, 2 copies, but 2 copies of each chromosome. So one pair of chromosome present in all the cells. Okay, we cannot have autosomes only one. There's always a pair. So, but in the gametes, now what are these gametes? Gametes are the ones which fuse to form the zygote. In the male, the gamete is the sperm, male gamete is the sperm, and the female gamete is the ova. Okay, so now before reproduction, gametes formation take place, and gametes are not haploid, but gametes are not diploid, but gametes are always haploid. They contain only one pair of the chromosome. Okay, so a sperm and these gametes are produced by the process of meiosis. Okay, so the sperm will, each sperm in the male will carry the X chromosome or either Y chromosome. Okay, and in the females, the gamete is the egg which will carry only X chromosome. Okay, so these are the gametes which have only one copy of the chromosome. It will be X or Y in the sperm, and in the ova it is always X. Okay, so now when sexual reproduction takes place, from the male, okay, from the male many sperms come, right, and the ova is only one. Okay, it is only one, but sperms are many. So sperms can be either X or Y, but the egg will be only X. Now which sperm, okay, which sperm, means sperm carrying either Y or X chromosome fuses with the egg carrying X chromosome will determine the sex of the child. Okay, so if the X chromosome carrying sperm fuses with the egg, the sex of the child will be X and X, that is the girl child. If Y chromosome carrying sperm fuses with the egg, the sex of the child will be X and Y. Okay, female and male. So from here it is evident that who determines the sex of the child? It is because of the sperms which are produced by the male. Okay, so which sperm is fusing with the egg carrying only X chromosome will determine whether the new zygote will have either XX and will produce a female, or X and Y and will produce a male. So sex or in humans is determined genetically, okay, and it is mostly determined because of the sperms and not because of the egg which is produced by the female. Okay, so this is the sex determination in humans, which is uh, genetically determined. Okay, and it is mainly because of the sperms carrying X or Y. Okay, so this is what we need to know about sex determination in humans. This is a very important concept in this chapter. The question will be explain sex determination in human beings, and we have to explain everything in detail for 2 to 3 marks. Okay, so this was all about the first part of the chapter, that is heredity. In the next video we will be discussing the second part of the chapter, that is evolution. Okay, so thank you for watching my video. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel.